Hello, I'm alone in Finland. This is going to be about Eve Frontier, but I've just made a video, sort of put up the video about the Frontier game, my sort of first reaction to it, and I deliberately hadn't looked at any of the stuff for the game beforehand. I saw that it was about blockchain and I thought, I'm going to hate this game. I sort of mentioned that previously. So I deliberately went out of my way to sort of a view on its first impressions when it came out. So I didn't read anything about it, I didn't look at anything about it, and sort of steered clear of all the hype deliberately so that I could sort of judge it on itself when it came out. And it's safe to say that my judgment isn't particularly good, because it is just recycled EVE Online. And essentially, from what I'm now reading, because I'm reading stuff now about it afterwards, it's supposed to be a little bit more of a hardcore mode of EVE Online, which makes sense, but it doesn't make sense from a business perspective, because the entire point of like making a game in general, you would be wanting people to play your game. You don't want to detract from that game. You don't want to make something that's the same, and they've done that. They've essentially doubled down. They've said EVE is successful, let's make a second one, which would make sense if it was a short-term game and you make a sequel to it. But this is long, sort of long line memorpicas where you want people to constantly engage over time. If you're splitting your audience, you might get people to play EVE Frontier, but they'll be taken away from EVE Online. So the sort of success narrative of EVE Frontier is that EVE Online ceases to exist, which is a particularly weird business strategy. I think most people could agree. Now, that may not be the intention, but that's definitely the side effect. As I mentioned, it's a Starbucks in front of a Starbucks. It's Ford coming out with a car called the Mondeo 2, which is everything from the Mondeo 1. But yeah, it's the same. It might be slightly different in some of the mechanics, but not different enough that you couldn't implement them in the first game. And I want to go through a few things here straight off, because there's some bits that I find actually more troubling now that I'm going through all of the stuff after it. First and foremost, I mentioned these previously, and I'm going to put them up just now. Now, I don't get any commission on this. I don't get any money in from this at all. I just think this is something cool, and I want to put it out there. Now, I mentioned in my previous video, Independence War and Independence War 2. That's these two games. Now, I used to play them, and I have them on CD. They are that old. In fact, my first Independence War demo came from a computer gaming magazine with a CD on it. But I have the original somewhere in the house, because I've kept a hold of them. I absolutely love them, but I noticed that they were on Steam. So I've gone and gotten them, and if you notice at the moment, it's €1.19. So, like, sell a couple of skins, put a couple of quid in. This is an old game, but still, the cinematic at the beginning of Independence War 2, while it looks dated, it still holds up storyline wise. So I absolutely recommend any gamer that likes space stuff to get these two games. And in total, it'll set you back, yeah, €2.40 to get great games. These were really long games. Independence War 1 is a bit harder. It's got more sort of keyboard controls. Every switch that you could see manipulated and did something. It's a very physics game based game. And it's fantastic. Just give it a try. You won't be disappointed. Independence War 2 was when they were starting to try and make this to fit for a console. So if you have a joystick with a hat, then a lot of the controls are very easy to access from this. But you can still play it mouse and keyboard, and it works well on a controller. So I'd say give these a go. I just wanted to put that out there because I think they're cool. Now, with that being said, League of Legends cinematics, and I know that's a tangent and a half, but I hate League of Legends. I think it's a despicable game because it is a rip-off of Dota, and I don't like Dota either, but when you're ripping off a game, just like Valorant ripped off Call of Duty, not Call of Duty, CSGO or Counter-Strike 1.6, whatever it was at the time they ripped it off, I don't like that to begin with. But League of Legends has something that was fantastic, and it's actually a French company that's behind all of their cinematics, which has then gone on to make the Arcane series. And I am very happy for the Arcane series. I'm not going to show any of these just now because like copyright and all that. I don't want to get into too much stuff. But these are well worth a watch, and the Arcane series is an absolute work of art when it comes to storytelling. I think it was absolutely brilliant. And I said originally, years before they came out, that because of the renders they do, if they had put as much work into the renders as they did to the game, they'd have a decent game. Unfortunately, this is a separate company that's working with Riot that makes these, so that's why it's a better skill base. It's a better people that are more enthused as to what they're doing, as opposed to the people making a game that are just there to build money. Now, the reason I mention this is because CCP also has some of the best sort of renders and storytelling when it comes to this. And when it comes to the lore that I've mentioned before, mentioned in a previous video as well, there is a whole load of lore around the game, little short stories and things that you can read that I recommend anybody go and read, because they are fantastic. Some of them don't have anything to do with the spaceships. The Ray of the Matar is all to do with a particular race getting their tattoos, and it's a very cool story. There's also one around about the Sierra Leone incident, which is to do with the formation of pirates and pirate interactions and stuff like this, and the stories are just fantastic, that would make really good TV series. I've said this for years, they'd make good audiobooks as well if they bothered to get somebody to actually narrate these stories. My personal recommendation being R.C. Bray. If you don't know who that is, go onto Audible, get one of the free trials. They throw them up all the time, and just pick any book with R.C. Bray narrating it. The Martian is one of the ones that he did, but it's not done by him anymore. It's done by Will Wheaton, i.e. Wesley Crusher from Star Trek. It's done by him now, doing a bad RCB impression as he's reading. And Will Wheaton's actually a good audio narrator. It's just that particular book is not good. It is if you don't know that it's kind of comical, the way that he's trying to do it. But with that said, I want to sort of go through this in the beginning, because there's a few things that strike me. First off, what is it with the red palette at the moment? I could understand it with the Triglavians, but now they're bringing it into this, and as you can see, like, really nice sort of cinematics, nice visuals and stuff like this. They don't correlate to the game in any sense, especially the scanners and stuff like this. That sort of shows the way the black scanner is, but that camera's not been done well enough. But there is some sort of good visuals and good ideas, and some definite sort of cinematic takes from different people. It shows an interesting lore around about this game that could be a good thing. But the problem is that when you're sort of comparing it to the original, comparing it to Eve, it's too close to be taken on its own. Now, this also speaks very much to, there's a particular particular video that came out when the Sisters of Eve started their factions, and that was quite sort of an impactful video. It's very well done, but unfortunately this is sort of speaking along the same story and narration, retelling the same story in a slightly different method. And while it's quite an interesting way of doing it, again, it doesn't bear much to the game. So it's looking cool. Also, very particularly, we are seeing an awful lot of this sort of recycled stuff from the Triglavians, especially the red tinting and everything, which just seems weird. Jumping through it, you come out and you get into normal space.
So too does your appetite for the unknown.
And it just seems... It seems Eve recycled. That's the best way of doing it. And for those of you who don't know, this is the effect of travelling through a planet in Warp in Eve, which is a particularly weird one to recycle. And here we are again, some big mystical structure, and
Ancient construct
the red,
in the dark.
all the red, and very heavily sort of remnant of the sleepers. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with this. At the same time, it could be a very interesting thing if they actually looped it back in. Looking at some of the faces here, it could be very interesting if they looped it back into the actual EVE Online systems, the EVE Online lore, where this was one of the other factions of humanity that get split off before the EVE Gate collapsed. So that's kind of interesting. However, then we get into the developer diary that popped up. Now, I just want to quickly go through this because he says some interesting stuff here.
These dynamic sites aren't just set dressing. They're interactive and destructible. Players face a compelling choice.
Okay, so first up, you've got destructible sites. Now, that's not something I noticed when I was scanning about on the original stuff, but obviously that's a starter area, so it couldn't be, and I'm going to play a bit more to have a look at this. But more destruction, more sort of manipulation of the environment makes sense, so that's a good thing.
Nurture the site patiently for maximum rewards, or raid it early for immediate gain.
So there you go, you go into a dungeon and you can sort of buff it to get a bit more, or you can try get it before other people get in, so it's a balancing act.
Allowing a site to fully mature can yield far greater rewards, providing strong incentive for nearby players to defend and nurture it.
So we're already touching on a PvP thing. This is more geared towards PvP, and I've said this previously, I've said this to death. 80% of the player base of online multiplayer games, Memorpagade games, do not involve themselves in PvP. So that very much sort of starts to limit down your player base, because you're taking something like EVE that's particularly niche, you're refining it again, so you're trying to pull players from your original game to your new game, and then you're making it even more niche appeal by making it more PvP focused instead of less. So you're sort of 80%ing or 20%ing of your previous player base.
But these aren't without risk. Roaming NPCs can influence or even destroy these developing sites, adding yet another unpredictable element to Frontier's dynamic environment.
So PvE is fine, but adding PvP, PvE into the mix, making it more dangerous, that's an interesting thing, but the PvE bit would be predictable. The PvP bit is the problematic bit.
Environments. And occasionally, a jackpot variant might emerge, offering exceptional resources and loot for those brave enough to secure it.
So again, the fear of missing out.
As these sites approach full maturity, their economic value rises significantly, becoming prized sources of passive income. This economic potential naturally drives player conflict.
Right. That's something that kind of annoys me, because it's not passive income in the truest sense, because the passive income is like planetary interaction in EVE Online. It's something you do secondary. This is income that needs to be protected, so it's not passive. If somebody can come in and wreck it, it's not passive income. It's not active income because you're not working with it potentially all the time, but it's also not passive because you still have to do something to protect it.
Encouraging players and tribes to risk their hardware to either secure and protect a profitable site, or deny rivals access to valuable resources.
So essentially it is nullsec harvesting and protecting the nullsec harvesters. That's what it seems to be. So it seems to be just a slight extension of what's going on in nullsec. Now that could be interesting for some people, but seems weird. Now this is of course a part of the thing, so not particularly bad on its focus, but I want to put this out here. Now, something that has come up, I'll see if I can grab your man's name here. So Loro Gaming. Now, I didn't know who this guy was beforehand, but the first search, I've actually got it on my second computer above me, but the first search for EVE Frontier that I did on a non-aligned account, so this is obviously my Alone in Finland account. On my second computer I have a habit of doing this where I'll start up a fresh sandbox, I'll load into it and then search to see what somebody with no affiliations, no sort of traceable IP or anything like this, to see that aspect of what's coming up. And I'm just sort of scanning through at the moment. There is 32 results on the first page, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 out of 32 results are from Loro Gaming on the search Frontier. If you're not aligned to anything, obviously, on here it's a little bit less, although he's still coming up a fair bit. But it's something that's quite funny to me, the fact that one player has so much spread across the search results, especially because one of the things I did after that was to search in a manipulated form looking for a particular video that I knew about, and it gets hidden down the line because of the way that YouTube sort of directs its search. But this came up. So again, this is Loro Gamer. You can see all this stuff.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room here, the crypto element of eFrontier.
Now, that's something that I was not aware of. I knew blockchain, but I didn't realize that they were going to go full crypto.
Yes, this game is going to utilize Web3 blockchain technology. Those same builders that we just talked about are going to be able to build those systems using the blockchain MUD interface. I don't know enough about it to say. Post in the comments if you're smarter than I am. What this is going to do is let those builders be able to make these items, systems, tools.
Right, so to TLDR this, there's going to be cryptocurrency in the game. You're going to be able to generate the cryptocurrency for the game. So instead of traditional mining, it's actually mined through the game. And then you can trade it, much like being able to trade on the community workshop, or however it's done, community market on Steam. So there will be trading in this game, and it will be stuff that's mined from the game. Now, that's not anything particularly new. Linking it into crypto is a new way of doing it. However, this is where it gets sort of dodgy, and let me explain why. There's two different reasons why I think it's a problem. The first one is this. Now, this is the European Consumer Protection Guidelines, and it's essentially going through limiting how games are doing their online currencies and things like this. This one being a big one, right? So the right of withdrawal for things is quite a severe thing, because very few companies sort of deal with this. And I know, like, bigger companies like Samsung has a thing where if you purchase a watch face on their phone app or whatever it is, you don't get any right of withdrawal, which you're legally required to do. So if you want to purchase a watch face and then you don't like it, they won't give you it back. They won't sort of refund the money or anything like that. Now, you can go to your credit card company, or you can go to PayPal, or however you're paying for it, and just say, oh, they're breaching this right, blah, 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 and you'll get the refund. But the companies are denying use for this, and a lot of game companies do this as well, especially Steam is something that has done this in the past. And they adjusted their sort of terms to work around about this because of the 14-day protection. That's why the Steam sort of refund thing is a bit longer than that now. But when it's coming to this one, the respect for consumer vulnerabilities, this is where you actually get into addiction and gambling, because there has been cases in the past where people have sort of gotten addicted to these things, and because there were no limitations in them, it provides a problem. Now, the other thing is that if you're starting to talk about generating lots of money, you're talking about blockchain, and a lot of people think the blockchain is impenetrable, and that's not the truth. There has been methods of cracking blockchain by less than a 15% penetration, which means that the sort of nodes that are looking after it, if you can compromise some of them, you can sort of get away with it. It's essentially like blindfolding all the cashiers in a bank and then switching some of the money around. Normally, any blockchain whatsoever, if you can compromise sort of 51%, you could make sneaky transactions. And there are questions as to whether this has happened with some particular big blockchains. However, for something that's smaller like this isn't a distributed network. The game appears to be running off of the actual server cluster for Eve, which makes it a single point of attack. Although it's multiple computers, it's still a single point of attack. So that means that it's less safe than it would appear to be because of the way the blockchain works. But also it means that an attack against that game for financial reward would affect their other games if they're not on separate server clusters. So it's an interesting sort of vulnerability that you'd put in there that could cause sort of systemic problems for you. If somebody wants to go after one thing, they could go after a lot. So I think that's particularly nervous. And when it comes to the whole trade aspect, it could go two ways. It could go the very bad way of this is blockchain and essentially moving the mining into grinding in the game, which is quite a funny way of doing it. I have to admit, I am actually quite impressed with that, because that's what these games are sort of attracted for. And obviously they're saying, oh, there's more chance of money, and the money is the main driving sort of equation. Somebody might be able to make money off of this, so they're going to go and try it. So that is actually quite a smart thing to put out there. But when you're talking the fact that the money in a market is dependent on how much there is, the easiest way that I could equate it is like basic level skins. Let's see if I've got any here. If I just bring up my Steam, go to my inventory and make sure that it doesn't have anything identifiable in it, and then go to Counter-Strike. Perfect, there we go. So on my stuff on Steam, on Counter-Strike, you can see that I have these skins, or these collectibles, these things that can be traded. Now some of the stuff like the music kit is part of the game, it can't be traded. Some of it is badges for how long you've played, etc. However, these are little things, little graffitis that can be traded. Now, that one's not marketable, so it's probably been used. I think I've actually sold everything that has been sort of marketed. Let's have a look at something else. So if we have something, say for instance in Space Engineers, like a zombie welder, you'll see that you can make 3 cents from it. Now Steam takes part of that percentage because this is part of the thing, they take a transaction. So you basically could sell this for 1 cent. So if you had a high transaction value, you could make a lot, but most people are not going to make €1 in a year. And that's the background to it, is that you are not gonna, they're talking about money, but the vast majority of people are not going to see that money, are not going to get anywhere near that money, which is actually much the same as the money in EVE. The vast majority of people have under 10 billion. This is their own figures that came out. So the vast majority of people have under 10 billion, but some people have trillions. They will never need to pay for their membership. It's the little people, the smaller sort of earners are the ones that pay into the game. The bigger earners never need to pay into the game. Maybe sometimes they do, but the ones that are sort of the heads of industry just don't need to. There's no point, because they've got everything they ever could. And that's the same way that this game will go, because that's the way that it sort of works. That's the way that capitalism works. People gain a bit more allows more leverage. If you have more money that you can spend on utility, then you have more utility to protect your assets and grow your assets, therefore you can grow them, and it's an exponential run. So on the surface this looks quite interesting, and there's definitely an advertising hook for it of, hey, you could generate some money. But the reality is, after a month or two, it's just not going to be feasible for the vast majority of people. And in that initial thing, the only way you're really going to be able to get a leg up is if you're going for some of the premium stuff that they're selling. But even that doesn't guarantee it. It's just a slight leg up. So it's, again, pay to lose your money to the company sort of thing. So as I was going through this, I can see some sort of big problems, and especially this consumer protection is getting more aggressive and sort of wider. And in the past, when Europe's brought this stuff in, US has been forced to comply. Much the same, China has some quite aggressive rules about this, and for all of the nastiness you can say about China, that is some stuff that they have done to protect their population. Granted, they see it as protecting their population from the evils of video games, but actually, ironically, it is protecting the population from the evils sort of brought on by video game companies that are very exploitative in the way to do things. And with CCP now being owned by another company and sort of being run by the requirement to generate profit for said company, it's not making some very good choices. But yeah, I don't think this game is as doomed to failure because of this, but I don't think that's a good thing because of it. Like, it's not doomed to failure because that promise of making money will bring people in, but it's the exact same as a casino saying, there's always a chance you could win. No, the vast majority don't, and it's not a good thing overall. So yeah, it basically looks like an online blockchain casino now. So it's interesting. I'm still going to give it another play. I'm going to have a look through it. I'm hoping that these things are sort of less prevalent, but just that little section of things being said about it is eye-opening. But I still, like, I still come back to the question, why does this game exist? These are things that could be implemented in EVE. So why make an entirely separate game for it? And I'm wondering if it's to do with the legality of what this is going on, that if this does fail or implode because of EU rules and laws and things, which obviously Iceland's susceptible to, and the main server cluster for CCP is in London, so they're outside but not exactly outside because Britain's not part of the EU, but it still has to abide by certain things, etc, etc. So I'm wondering if this is sort of legal insulation against some of that as well, which might explain it, but it seems like a weird way to split your resources. I can see a lot of downsides that don't take away from the upsides. That don't get counterbalanced by the upsides. It is a weird thing. So yeah, again, I thought I'd put this out. I'm going to read a bit more about it. I'm going to give it another play later on, and then we shall see. But I thought it's good info for people to have. So thanks for watching. Again, stuff down in the doobly-doo. I linked the stuff for the Independence War games in the last video, so pop back to that if you want those links on Steam. Again, not affiliated, no money to me. They are just things that I think are awesome and people should get a go with. And if you like EVE Online originally, well, this is the stuff that got me into EVE Online. It's more simulation based, but it is just awesome. It really is. And the first one's quite unforgiving, which I think is awesome. But when you realise you can pull out some of the stuff that you see in likes of the Expanse and stuff like this. One of my favourite things that I did in it, this is again going back 20 years, was I was getting into a fight that I just couldn't deal with. I managed to just accelerate away for the fight, and I accelerated away for about half an hour, turned around, slowed down and started burning back. And as I was burning back, launched all of my missiles so that they were flying next to us, and at the last second peeled my ship off to the side so that all of the missiles that impacted the ship that I was going after, that was about 10 times the size of me. It was a massive big thing, and I managed to absolutely shred it in a sort of what years later I would see kind of done in the Expanse. So I thought that was cool, so I'm putting those games out there. So hopefully somebody enjoys it. Again, comments, criticisms, critiques, ideas, thoughts on all of this stuff, please put it down in the doobly-doo. I am more than willing to read, to interact, and I'm very curious about what other people think about this, because I am obviously my own bubble. One particular sort of view on it, and I'm very curious to see what other people think, so please do. So bye.